Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the Sabbath that's coming, and some of us are already experiencing the blessed hours of the Sabbath. As we open your word together, we just ask for your Spirit to be here to teach us and give me wisdom and understanding and skill in presenting a topic that could be complicated, but we know, Lord, that your Holy Spirit can teach us, and that you can simplify this and make it understandable to all minds and hearts who are willing to learn. And so we ask, Lord, that we can be willing to learn, that we can understand the things in your words, in your word that points to events in the present day, and that we can have confidence that you are leading in our lives personally, just as you are leading in world events. So we give our hearts to you, and we ask for your Spirit to be here and to comfort us and to teach us. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So in this study on July 18th, 2020, many people watching this will have some idea of what it's about. But I'm going to show some of the ways in which we came to understand the significance of this date. And I'm not going to deal as much with all, because this is about an attack, nuclear attack on the United States, which we place as being in Nashville. And I'm not going to be focusing upon the Nashville aspects, how we know it's Nashville, how we came to understand that. That is, we connected statements in Ellen White's writings, a vision that she was given regarding an attack on Nashville, which some people interpret as meteorites, as a fireball that just falls from the sky. But we have reason to believe that this is a nuclear attack that's being talked about, and also that we have the timing for it. So we're going to go through those evidences of how we came to understand this. And sometimes when people have seen us presenting on this topic, they will see a lot of numbers, they'll see a lot of mathematics, and this is an analysis of this prophecy that has come after the fact of our understanding it. That is, the way that we came to understand this prophecy is really the interesting story. For me, anyway, because I was a part of it, but it's an interesting story because it shows something about now, the present time, of what is happening in this world and the connection with the past. And so the past and the present are connected through this prophecy, not just the prophecy itself, but how it has unfolded. And this is a principle that we use, which is called line upon line, and it looks at histories or lines in the past. And there's a lot of details that a person would need to be aware of to really understand it fully. But I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can. I'm going to leave out a lot of details. Some of them are even pertinent details, but maybe there's just too much detail. So I found a way to present this that I think is simple, and that at least points to it. And then I sort of backtrack and then sort of shore it up a little bit once I present the basic argument. So this study came about as a result of studying the book of Ezekiel. And back in 2016, we came to understand that the book of Ezekiel was speaking about our time. And it's a book that I studied ever since I was a child, never understood it. But the book of Ezekiel always fascinated me, especially in chapter 8, when he was carried off in vision and meant to look through this hole in the wall into the temple. And as a child, that always just fascinated me, all the imagery in the book of Ezekiel. It seemed to always come alive, but I never understood it. For years as a Christian, I would read it, but never really knew what it was talking about. But as I started studying chronology, Ezekiel has 13 dates in it, which are very, very interesting. That's a whole study in and of itself. But what we're going to look at is we're going to look at first at Ezekiel chapter 4. And Ezekiel chapter 4, Ezekiel has this vision where he's told to lie on his left side for 390 days. And we're going to read this. And then he's going to be told to lie on his right side for 40 days. So I'm going to bring this up here so everybody can see it. Now, in the book of Ezekiel, the first date or the first vision that he's given, we're going to go back there first. So I have Ezekiel chapter 4 here, but I just want to quickly show you the chronology of this. And if you go to chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, it says, "Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. And in the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him." So this is his first vision. And it gives us some chronology here, which I'm going to draw on the board in a minute. But this vision, everything that happens in chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, all the way up to chapter 7, all happen on that day. And then in chapter 8, he will have his second vision. So chapter 4 is included in this, this date, and we're going to look at it. So it's the 30th year, it's the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity, and the 5th day of the 5th day of the 4th month. So the 5th day of the 4th month in the 30th year, doesn't say what that is, and then in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. And we're going to lay that out so you understand what that is. And he is given this vision of the siege of Jerusalem. And he's predicting this siege. We're gonna lay this chronology out as well. But I'm just going to read from verse 4 to verse 6. It says, "Lie thou also upon thy left side." So he's told to make this siege, lay out this city of Jerusalem in sort of a, portray it with models, so to speak. Draws the city, puts an iron pan, all these different things, lays siege weapons against it. But he says, "Lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it. According to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year." Now this expression, a day for a year, in the Hebrew, it actually says a day to a year, a day to a year. It doubles it. And this is an interesting point. We're going to look at this. There's lots here, but I'm going to stop the share and draw this out so we can see this. So here he's going to lie on his left side and on his right side. Now, the day that this begins is the 5th day of the 4th month in the biblical calendar. And so this is, and it's not super duper important to understand everything about the calendar at this point. But the Jewish calendar begins in the spring and it has months of 30 and 29 days. It's a lunar calendar that's adjusted every second or third year by adding a 13th month so that it aligns with the solar year. But this date is July 21st, and the year is 592 BC. Now this date here is important, both the biblical date and this date. And this is the date that he has his first vision. And he's going to lie on his left side for 390 days. Now, when the vision starts out, it says that this is in the 30th year. So there's 30 years here. And these 30 years go back to 622 BC. That's how, if you just add 30 to 592, you get 622. And this is going to go to the Passover of Josiah. So this is King Josiah, 622 BC. But there's also 5 years in here. And this 5 years is from 597 BC. And this is from the captivity of Jehoiachin. So he's going to talk about in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity, and he's going to mention that a few times in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was taken captive at the same time as Jehoiachin. So he's in that same captivity. He's in Babylon in captivity when he has this vision. And he's going to lie on his left side for 30 days. And then he's going to lie on his right side for 40 days. So if we're going to count the number of days from the 5th day of the 4th month in 592 BC and work out the calendar, we're going to find that the last day that he lies on his left side is this date, the 10th day of the 5th month. And the 10th day of the 5th month is an interesting date. We're going to focus upon that. Now, he also is going to have another vision, his second vision, in this period of 40 days that he's lying on his right side. That's the vision in chapter 8. And then he's going to have a third vision. So this is his first vision over here. His second vision is going to be here. So I'm just going to put this here. First vision. He's going to have his second vision 25 days in. And this is here. This one's going to be on the 6th year of Jehoiachin's captivity on the 6th month and the 5th day of the month. But it's this one here that's going to that we're going to be interested in here. And this is a year after this. It's on the 10th day of the 5th month. And it's Ezekiel 20. So in Ezekiel 20, verse 1, it tells us, and it came to pass in the 7th year, in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, that certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of the Lord and sat before me. So I didn't share that on the screen there, but that's Ezekiel 20, verse 1. So it's on the 5th month, on the 10th day of the month, just as it was the last day that he lay on his left side. Now, this date is very significant. We know that Ezekiel, and I'm not going to deal with the prophecy here that shows what he's predicting, because he's going to predict the start of the siege, and I'm not going to deal with that prophecy at this point. But I want to show that he's using this date, the 10th day of the 5th month, in a repeated manner. Now, this isn't noticed until recently that this 390 days ends on the 10th day of the 5th month. Now, the next day, he's going to begin lying on his right side for 40 days. And that date is August 15th, 591 BC, because the dates go backwards. And this one here is 590 BC. So he's going to start here in 592 on July 21st. And then for 390 days, he's going to lie on his left side. And the last day will be the 10th day of the 5th month. And then he's going to have his third vision also on the 10th day of the 5th month. Now, the event that he's predicting is the siege of Jerusalem. And we're going to find that if you go to Ezekiel 24, verse 1, that the siege of Jerusalem is going to begin. And that's in the year 587. It's on the 10th day of the 10th month. So it's not in the 5th month, but it's on the 10th day of the 10th month. And this is a period of, as you can see here, this is about 3 years. This is from here, it's going to be 4 years. It's going to be about 5 years from when he first has his vision, and he's going to be predicting an event in the future. And there's going to be a period of 390 years and 40 years that are both going to end at the beginning of this siege. And so I'm going to just explain it enough to know that these 390 days are going to represent 390 years. And they're going to begin way back here in 977 BC. And this is in 1 Kings chapter 13, verse 1 to 5. And also you can look in chapter 12, the last few verses. And what this is this is a prophecy of Josiah. And that prophecy of Josiah is going to be fulfilled, and it's going to be 40 years. It's actually from 627 BC that this prophecy in 1 Kings is fulfilled. So I said I wasn't going to explain it in detail, but I am going to explain at least enough of these references. I'm not going to read them, but I want you to go back and look at them. And I'm just going to mention a couple of things about them. So in 1 Kings chapter 12, at the end, you'll see that Jeroboam, this is the time the kingdom of Israel is divided, and Jeroboam is going to offer at the altar of Bethel. He builds 2 altars, one in Dan, which is in the north, one in Bethel, which is in the south. And he's going to offer upon his altar, acting as both a priest and a king. He's mixing church and state in a way that is forbidden by God. A priest is supposed to offer. Plus, also, he has set up a false day of worship. He's chosen the 15th day of the 8th month. So, if you read the passage, you'll find that he sets up this counterfeit worship day on the 15th day of the 8th month. And this also becomes a symbol, this 15th day of the 8th month in 597 or 977 BC. It's fulfilled 350 years later that Josiah is going to fulfill this prophecy that's given, where he's going to burn dead man's bones upon this altar that's in Bethel. And you can find the fulfillment of that prophecy in 2 Kings 23, verses 18 to 21. So I'm not going to read them because that's a completely different study. But it's this prophecy of the 390 days and the 40 days and the dates that show up that become an interest to us here at this time. So I just ask, if you want more details regarding the prophecy of Ezekiel, the 390 years and the 40 years and the different arguments and how we look at it, you can look at other presentations on that. We actually have a series where we go through this in a lot more detail on the book of Ezra. So we're going to deal with, not Ezra, we're going to deal with the prophecy of Josiah. So anyway, I can't remember what the name of the study is, but we go through that. Does somebody have a question? Okay, so no one has a question here at this point. So we have this prophecy, this prophecy of 390 years and 40 years. And the 40 years, both the 390 years and the 40 years are going to end at Ezekiel 24, verse 1. Now, this 390 years, so I'm going to put it up here, 390 years is important. Now, we know that there's 390 days and 40 days, but they aren't added together because both of these days, he's lying on his left side looking at the siege for 390 days, and then he flips over to his right side and continues to face that siege for 40 days. So both of these periods of time, the 390 years and the 40 years, are going to end here. And we're going to read that passage in Ezekiel. So in Ezekiel 24, I'll share the screen here. Verse 1, it says, "And again in the 9th year, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, write thee the name of the day, even this same day. The king of Babylon set himself against Jerusalem this same day." And so God is telling Ezekiel that the siege has begun. Ezekiel is 500 miles away in Babylon. It would have taken months for him to get news that Jerusalem was under siege. But God sends an angel and tells him that that siege had begun on that day. So he had predicted the start of the siege. But we can see that he predicted more than the start of the siege, because we'll find out later that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. Specifically, the temple is going to be destroyed. And that's going to happen in 586 BC. And it's going to happen, hopefully everyone can see that, 586 BC. And it's going to happen on the 10th day of the 5th month. So in 586 BC, the temple is destroyed. And so you can see that he's predicting, with these two dates, he's predicting also this date. Now, some people would argue, well, he's predicting the siege, that's very clear. But we can't ignore the fact that in Ezekiel 20, verse 1, that he has a vision on the 10th day of the 5th month. And for the next 4 chapters, 20, 21, 22, and 23, it's all about the destruction of Jerusalem. And that in 24, the siege begins, but hidden is this date, this 10th day of the 5th month. But also it's even more hidden here in this 390 days. So this 390 days is also suggesting that the 10th day of the 5th month is going to be significant. So this is the line in Ezekiel. So if you go to Ezekiel, you'll see that he's dealing with this whole history from 977 BC to 586 BC. That whole period of time, from here to here, is 391 years. Well, if you actually look at it in more detail, you will see that the kings of Judah, from the divided kingdom in 977 BC to the death of Zedekiah, the last king, is actually 391.5 years. And you can do this. It's not as simple as I make it sound, but if you go and you look at all the Bible verses about how long the various kings reigned, and you add them up, and you have to only take into account that there's a 2-year co-regency between Jehoshaphat and Joram, and these are the kings of Judah, that there's actually 305 years. Now, I've worked it out in much more complicated detail, looking at the kings of Judah and Israel. It took me a couple of years to do that work. But if you just added them up, it'd be 393.5 years. But you have to take 2 years out for that one co-regency that's mentioned But you also have to work out how long it is, because it doesn't tell you it's 2 years. You have to compare the kings of Judah and Israel. So some people find it a little bit complicated to do. I have it all worked out. I have papers on it. So if you really want to know how I came to this date, that's one of the ways. Also, another way that I came to this date was through the prophecy of the 2520. And that is, I recognized that the 2520 has this 977 BC, a period of 490 years. And this 490 years is the period from the anointing of Saul to the captivity of Daniel in 607 BC. And Daniel's captivity starts a period of 70 years, which ends in 537. And this is known as the Babylonian captivity. So this 490 years isn't specifically mentioned in the Bible, but it is indirectly mentioned when you study Leviticus chapter 26, verse 34 to 35, and 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21, 19 to 21. You'll see that the reason the 70 years Babylonian captivity was 70 years long is that the land was supposed to rest every 7 years. And since it didn't, it then had to rest for 70 years. And that means there had to have been 70 times 7 years in the period where the land didn't rest. So that's one way we come to the 490 years. There's other periods of 490 years as well. There's one for the temple, from when it was first dedicated, and that's in the 4th year. So you got Saul, David, and Solomon. And in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, you're going to have the temple dedicated. Solomon's going to reign for 40 years. David reigns for 40 years, and Saul reigns for 40 years. And if you count from the dedication of this temple in the year 1006, pardon me, so you have 1013 BC when they start to build the temple. They build it for 4 years, or 7 years, pardon me. I'm jumping ahead. 7 years, and then it's dedicated in 1006 BC, and 490 years later, in the year 516 BC, the second temple is dedicated. So you're going to have another period of 490 years that's going to end in 516. And of those 490 years, 420 years the temple exists, but 70 years it lays in ruins. So I could do it like this, 420. And this whole period then, from here to here, from dedication to dedication, is 490 years. So this is probably not the most important point to bring out, but some people might be interested in this or be familiar with it. If somebody's having an argument, how do I know this chronology? This is something that you could show them in a separate study. And sometimes I would prepare people with studies like this first. So I wouldn't necessarily jump into July 18th, 2020. It would depend on the person, how much confidence they have in you as a person. Are they listening and attentive? Are they wanting to learn? Obviously, those are the best people to get a study with. But some people can be prepared by other studies that can show how chronology works and how everything is tied together. So that's a bit of an aside. What we do find, though, is that this period of 391 and a half years is going to be interesting as we move on. Now, we know that Ezekiel was predicting the destruction of Jerusalem based upon these two dates, the 10th day of the 5th month and the 10th day of the 5th month. And Jerusalem's destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month in 586. But this isn't the first time that the temple was destroyed. It was destroyed twice. And the temple was destroyed in 586, I'm going to put this here, on the 10th day of the 5th month. But we find from Josephus that when the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, it was also on the 10th day of the 5th month. And Josephus was there. And so he notes that it was destroyed on the same date on the biblical calendar as it was in 586. So he notes that there's this connection between the 10th day of the 5th month and the 10th day of the 5th month here, and these two destructions of Jerusalem. So this becomes extremely significant because we know that Ezekiel is here predicting this event. But when he predicts this event, remember that he starts 5 years before in 592 on July 21st. And that dates the 5th day of the 4th month, which we're going to look at a little bit later. So 5 years, or this is basically 6 years before the destruction of Jerusalem. And if we wanted to, we could sort of, well, we'll just say it's 6 years from when he has his first vision to when Jerusalem is destroyed. But we know that he also referenced some events. And he said that this was in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. Jehoiachin, King Jehoiachin, was taken captive on March 16th, 597 BC. And this is recorded in the Babylonian Chronicles, this event. So we know exactly the date that it occurred. We also know how long he reigned, for 3 years and 10 days, 3 months and 10 days, that Jehoiachin reigned. But when Ezekiel is giving his prophecy, he's dating his prophecies in reference to the captivity of Jehoiachin. And he's counting it as if it's the years of Jehoiachin's reign. Now, Jehoiachin is held captive for 36 years. In 561 BC, he is led out of prison. This is at the death of Nebuchadnezzar, evil Merodach, such a terrible name. He comes to the throne and he releases Jehoiachin from prison. Now, this captivity of Jehoiachin is mentioned in Leviticus 26. In Leviticus 26, there are 4 events that are going to be marked. We call them the first 7 times, the second 7 times, and third 7 times, and the fourth 7 times. The first one is 677. This is Manasseh's captivity. The second one is Daniel's captivity. This is in the reign of Jehoiakim, so I'm just going to put Kim here. And then Jehoiakim's son, Jehoiachin, he's taken captive in 597. So we'll just call this Chin. And then Zedekiah is killed in 586. And these are the events that mark the progressive destruction of Jerusalem. And it's mentioned in Leviticus 26, and we could do a whole study on this. The thing is, the third event here, Jehoiachin's captivity, is mentioned, and it says that they shall measure his bread by weight. One of the things we find in the Babylonian Chronicles is that we have the record of Jehoiachin being taken captive. But while he's in prison, and even afterwards, he is fed from the king's table. And they give an account. It's called the grain ration tablet. And it tells how much food Jehoiachin and his sons, who were also in captivity with him, were fed. And here in Leviticus 26, it says that they shall measure your bread by weight. So this was literally fulfilled in the case of Jehoiachin. Now, so he's in captivity for 36 years. Now we know that the 70 weeks end with the close of probation of the Jews in 34 AD with the stoning of Stephen. So this is the close of probation. And some of these things you may need to explain to people if they don't know about the 70 weeks. But this is the period of time that the Jews are given. It's another period of 490 years, just like we had one for the kingship, and we had one for the temple, we have one for the people. And when Stephen is stoned in 34 AD, the Jews have closed their probation, and they're no longer considered God's denominated people. And 36 years later, Jerusalem is destroyed. Now it's interesting in the way that this is counted. If we were to continue counting Jehoiachin's captivity all the way up to 70 AD, we would find that that period of time, so we know that obviously he dies and his captivity ends after 36 years, but if we were to count this period of time between his captivity and the destruction of Jerusalem the second time, so we know Ezekiel refers to this and he predicts the destruction of Jerusalem the first time, but he's also inadvertently predicting the destruction of Jerusalem a second time, because that symbol of the 10th day of the 5th month is going to show up. It shows up first, the 390 days that he lies on his left side. It shows up in Ezekiel 20 verse 1, and it shows up with the destruction of Jerusalem the first time. But it also shows up here, and this can connect this history to this history. I don't think Ezekiel would have had any idea of the connection between what he was predicting about Jerusalem here and what was going to happen in 70 AD. But the period of time from 597 to 70 AD is 666 years. Now this is very significant. We know that this captivity here of Jehoiachin is in Leviticus 26. And if you read in Leviticus 26, you'll see that this is the siege of Jerusalem by Babylon. Now, the sister chapter to Leviticus 26 is Deuteronomy 28. Now, Deuteronomy 28 specifically refers to the siege of Jerusalem by Rome. And I'm going to look at these verses. And I think this is a really important point to understand. So I'm not going to, I'm going to go through this a little bit more carefully than I do sometimes. So first we're going to look at Leviticus 26. And under the third 7 times, which begins in verse 24, and I will also walk contrary unto you, that's if you walk contrary unto me, and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. So I've got to share this here. It's I didn't want to ask it to you. Okay, here we go. And I will bring a sword upon you, that ye shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant. Now there's lots here dealing with this quarrel of my covenant and what this is about, which I'm not going to get into. But it says, when you are gathered together within your cities, I will send the pestilence among you, and ye shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. And when I have broken the staff of your bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver you your bread again by weight. And ye shall eat, and not be satisfied. So there's a bunch of symbolism in here, which I'm not going to go into. But the thing is, we can see that this was literally fulfilled by Jehoiachin, even though it has a broader application. But this is the third 7 times. This is referring to an event that was fulfilled in 597 BC. Now, when we go to Deuteronomy 28, we're going to find that Deuteronomy 28 has a lot of similarities to Leviticus 26. And we're not going to go through all that, but if you read it, you'll see that there's lots of similarities. It's talking about the blessings and the curses. So some of the same things. It talks about the scattering. It goes into maybe a lot more detail in Deuteronomy 28. But when you get further on, in verse 49, it says, the Lord shall bring a nation again against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Now this nation of fierce countenance is also referred to in the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 8, in the angel's explanation of the vision, it talks about this just near the end of the chapter. And it's going to talk about first Greece. So Greece is going to be broken in verse 22. And it says, in the latter time of their kingdom, so in the latter time of the kingdom of Greece, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences
shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, which would be Christ, but he shall be broken without hand. Now, this is referring to Rome, and specifically to pagan Rome. So the siege of Jerusalem that happened, and you're going to see this is all about the siege of Jerusalem. You're going to see it later in chapter 12 or chapter 9. You're going to see the siege of Jerusalem also referred to in verse 26 and 27. So if you don't know about that, I would have you search out and study this. You would use Leviticus 26, you would read that, Deuteronomy 28, the end part of Daniel chapter 8, the explanation of the vision, and you can see that it's Rome. You can also see that this is Rome when you read chapter 11 and 12, but more specifically, that it's referring to the destruction of Jerusalem. You're going to see that in chapter 9, verse 26 and 27. So that the power that's going to destroy Jerusalem in 70 AD is Rome. And it's the king of fierce countenance, which we have in Deuteronomy 28. Now it says you don't understand their language you understand not. And that would be talking in dark sentences. It's just another way of saying that they talk in a way that you don't understand. So, and we know that obviously this can't be referring to other kingdoms that have a language similar to the Jews, but also the language that was understood by the Jewish nation. There was several languages that were understood. One would have been, depending, because as a trading language was the language of Greek. But the Roman language, Latin, was not understood. And that would be the language that they did not understand, that has those dark sentences. So when we look at Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, we know that this is a connection between Babylon and Rome. Now, Babylon is a pagan power, and so is Rome. But Babylon, and we look at the prophecies in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, we see that this is a progression of kingdoms, from Babylon to Medo-Persia to Greece and to Rome. But these two destructions of Jerusalem, or these two sieges, and then eventually the destruction here, these two sieges are marked by a period of 666 years. Now, the number 36 at the beginning, because this starts the siege of Jehoiachin until he's released, and this 36 years here from 34 AD to the destruction of Jerusalem are obviously part of this structure. So to have the number 36, the Babylonians have a thing called a magic square. Now in Alberta here, our land is divided into 6 by 6 squares. It's called a township. And there's 36 squares here. And they arrange the numbers in such a way, that when you add them all up, this line will equal 111, and this line will equal 111. Each of the lines going across will equal 111. And since there are 6 rows, measure going this way, you'll end up, it'll all equal to 666. That is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way up to plus 36, equals 666. They arrange it in such a way that even when you count the rows downward, each of the rows add up to 111. I've actually drawn one out myself. I worked it out mathematically how to do it. But this is a magic square. And they use this number 36. We can also see it in the 36 degrees of the circle. It's a number from astronomy or astrology, in that they divide the 12 zodiacs, have 3 houses or whatever they're called. I can't remember the terminology, whether the houses are 3 of them in each of the zodiacs, the signs of the zodiac, but there's 36 of them. So this is a representation of Babylonian mysticism. And we can see that Rome has had that passed on down to them. But papal Rome is also going to inherit this number, 666. So it's, and you can't see the square down here, so there you go. So Rome is also going to inherit this 666 number, Papal Rome. So this comes from Babylon. And it shows that Papal Rome is also a continuation of Babylonian mysticism. So this is an important point as well. One of the things that we can see is that Ezekiel is predicting an event in his time, and he sees its fulfillment. But he's inadvertently predicting an event in the future. Now, the way that we came to understand July 18th, the first time, was from Ezekiel looking at this literal 390 and 40 days. And so I'm going to explain this part a little further. What we did is we took all these 10 days of the fifth month. So we're going to put this again here, just 70 AD, 10th day of the fifth month. And then we have 586, 10th day of the fifth month. And then we have 5, I don't know why I put 520, it's 591 up here. 591 BC, 10th day of the fifth month. And then the first 10th day of the fifth month is 590 BC. And we've seen that he was predicting this event, but we also believe that he was predicting another event. And that event was July 18th, 2020. And the way that we came to understand that was simply we took this vision here of Ezekiel 20, and we connected this to the year 20, the year 2020. And we did it in a couple of ways, just the Ezekiel 20, the fact it was Ezekiel 20. And I'm going to explain a bit more as we go through. But he was predicting this, using this Ezekiel 20, talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And we know the destruction of Jerusalem is a type of the end of the world. Both the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 and the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD are typifying the end of the world. But the question is when? Now, we had already had a date, and this date was November 9th. November 9th, 2019. Now, this is not a date that I picked, but it was a date that I bore witness to. And the way that I bore witness to this, I'm going to move this over here so I have some room. So we've got 70 AD over here, 586 BC, is I was at Lambert Church on October 13th, 2018. And 10 days before this, we had a prediction. And this prediction was based upon, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it was based upon all these timelines that all pointed to November 9th, 2019. And this was given on October 3rd, 2018, 10 days before October 13th. And this was given in, and for some of you may understand this, some people may not who are watching this video, but this was given in 2 sermons by Tess Lambert, entitled 10 Years and The Midnight Cry. Now, the Midnight Cry, I have to backtrack and explain what this is. The Midnight Cry comes from the parable of the 10 virgins. And this was understood in Millerite history. And for those that want to know more about this, you can study the studies that we do on Sundays that have been recorded under the structure of prophetic chronology. We've gone into detail about this. But the idea of the Midnight Cry is really quite simple. In Millerite history, William Miller predicted that the world was going to end and Jesus was going to return in the year 1843. And as time went on, they revised this to the Jewish year 1843, which ended at sunset on April 18th, 1844. At sunset on April 18th, 1844, all of their hopes that Jesus was going to return, based on Miller's prophecy, had failed. Now, there was this other man named Samuel Snow who had decided back in 1843 that Jesus wasn't going to come back in the spring of 1844, but that he was going to return in the fall of 1844. And the date that this is what we would call the first day, the next day, so I'm just going to get rid of the 18 and I would put a 19. The 19th is the first day of the first month. And he said that Jesus was going to come back actually on the 10th day of the 7th month. This is the Day of Atonement. And he had written a series of letters and all kinds of things, but he gave the message, the midnight cry, halfway between the first day of the first month and the 10th day of the 7th month. And that date was the 5th day of the 4th month, because that's halfway between the 10th day of the 7th month and the first day of the first month. And that date was July 21st. Now, of course, we've already seen the 5th day of the 4th month. That was here in 592 when Ezekiel began his prophesying. Now, the Jewish calendar moves around every year. So once in every 30 years on average, the 5th day of the 4th month will be July 21st. So it's only 1 in 30 chance that the 5th day of the 4th month is going to align with July 21st. It just so happens that Ezekiel's prophesying begins on the 5th day of the 4th month, which is July 21st on the Julian calendar. This is the Gregorian. And he's predicting this event, which is going to happen, I'll put the 10th day of the 7th month underneath here. And that's going to happen on October 22nd. That's the 10th day of the 7th month. Now, Ezekiel's last prophecy is given in chapter 40, verse 1, that you have this date. And we find that that date is Rosh Hashanah, on the 10th day of the 7th month, which in 573 BC. So I'm just going to say that Ezekiel here in 592 BC, we have the same thing that we have here in 1844. And in 1844, October 22nd is the 10th day of the 7th month, just as it is in 573 BC in Ezekiel 40. So Ezekiel and Samuel Snow are connected by this 5th day of the 4th month. Samuel Snow gets up and proclaims that it's midnight. He doesn't realize that he's exactly halfway to the day between the first day of the first month and the 10th day of the 7th month, because he's not fully understanding the biblical calendar here at this point. But he is saying that we've been in this tarrying time for 6 months. Now this would be or for 3 months. So the tarrying time is this period of 6 months, because that's a half of a day, because this is the night, and the midnight would be 3 months in. So he asked the audience, how long is a day in Bible prophecy? It's a year. How long would a night be? It'd be 6 months. How long to midnight? 3 months. And how long have we been in the tarrying time? Just 3 months. So he says, to now is the midnight, and I'm giving the midnight cry. So he didn't fully understand what he was doing, but he knew he was somewhat midway between here, but he was exactly midway to the very day. And so this 5th day of the 4th month, we call midnight. So we can see Ezekiel begins his prophesying at midnight. And if you go through his whole book, it's going to end with this, October 22nd, the 10th day of the 7th month. Now, in Millerite history, we came to understand this was the cleansing of the sanctuary. And in chapter 40, it's going to talk about the building of the sanctuary, or the temple. So there is a connection between Ezekiel and Millerite history. So that some people may not be that familiar with this. There's lots of places that you can go to read about this. Midnight Cry by Nichols is a good book to read. Can't think of his F.D. Nichols. So you could read about that. But this idea that this is the 5th day of the 4th month is something that is relatively new in our understanding. That is, we didn't know, because the Millerites never kept track. They never thought about which day this was. They just thought about it in the context of their calendar. So this, using this symbol and connecting it to Ezekiel, is something that's fairly recent, within about the last 4 years. So it's not something that has been known within Adventism for a long time. Now, we also know that Most Adventists would look at August 15th, 1844, because this is a sermon that he did at Boston. But most people didn't know about this. Ellen White refers to this as midway, but she doesn't give a date. But most people assume that the midway is referring to this date, which is the first day of the fifth month, August 15th, and this is Exeter. So most Adventists would know about Exeter. The thing that's interesting is August 15th as a symbol is this symbol here. The 8th month is August and the 15th day. So even though this is a different calendar, we see this symbol of the 15th day, 8th month, or the 8th month, 15th day, August 15th in this history. On the biblical calendar here, it's the first day of the 5th month. That's also in Ezekiel. So a lot of these dates show up in Ezekiel. Actually, all 3 of these dates, or all 4 of these dates, pardon me, show up in the book of Ezekiel out of the 13 dates. The first day of the first month occurs, the 5th day of the 4th month, the first day of the 5th month, and the 10th day of the 7th month. So Ezekiel testifies of this history 4 times. And in 2 of those dates, it's the same, this one here and this one here, it's the same date on the Gregorian calendar here as it is in the Julian. Now, we also notice that this symbol of midnight here, when he begins to lie on his left side, is also fulfilled here when he begins to lie on his right side. This date is August 15th. So this is midnight, and this is the midnight cry. This is midnight, and this is the midnight cry. And these 2 things are connected. Now, there's a lot of other things, a lot of other ideas that can be brought out, because this is just scratching the surface. This is just basically almost like a shadow depiction of something, just an outline. But there's a lot more detail in here. But these symbols, midnight and the midnight cry, become extremely important symbols, as we will see, in regard to the prediction about July 18th. Now, there's a lot more about July 18th that I could show here, because the day that I figured this out, this was not July 18th. Well, I guess I could leave this. This is July 18th. We'll deal with that. But I was actually looking at the Julian calendar, July 18th. Because the Julian calendar in the year 2020, what I wanted to know, if I went to the year 2020, I wanted to know which day was the 10th day of the 5th month. And I found that it was July 18th. But it was a Julian date, the 10th day of the 5th month. So this date here, the 10th day of the 5th month, on the Julian calendar is July 18th. On our calendar, it's July 31st. In our century and in last century, there's 13 days difference between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar. The Julian is a pagan Roman calendar. The Gregorian is a papal Roman calendar. And different countries changed, but the first time it changed from the Julian to the Gregorian in 1582, it actually was only 10 days difference at that time. Now it's 13 days difference. So in next century, it'll be 14 days difference if the world went on that long. So we have some symbols here, and I just want to look at them or sum them up. We have symbols like the 5th day of the 4th month. This is a symbol of what we call midnight. We also have the symbol of the 15th day of the 8th month. And this is a symbol of the midnight cry. This is a symbol from Millerite history. We also have the 10th day of the 7th month. But the one that's really important here is for the destruction of Jerusalem, is the 10th day of the 5th month. So this is, we'll just say, the destruction of the temple. The temple is actually destroyed on that day. Jerusalem is destroyed over a period of time. So the temple is destroyed on the 10th day of the 5th month. So these are the important symbols that we have in this history. Now, so when I first figured this out, July 18th, 2020, I'd actually connected this with another history. And this history here, October 13th, this prediction was, or this date here in which I made this calculation, I calculated at noon on October 13th that it was 391 and a half days to November 9th. So I'm going back here. We have the symbol of the midnight cry. Tess believed that she was giving the midnight cry on October 3rd. A lot of people still mark that. I've seen people who mark October 3rd. But based upon this, the 10 years, we have a day for a year. 10 days later, the midnight cry was actually given. And that was on October 13th at noon. And I was there as their sermon was being presented regarding this date, November 9th, even though the speaker, Daniel, never made reference to November 9th. He just talked about time setting. Now, Daniel from Brazil had made a prediction. He predicted that from the camp meeting, he predicted from June 10th to June 9th, would be 126 days that the midnight cry would be given at Lambert Church. This is a camp meeting they had in Italy. And there's lots of detail I'm leaving out. But the important thing I want to point out is that he had made this prediction on a date that we're going to look at, July 27th. This is an important date. And he made this prediction, and this 391.5 days, I noticed, to November 9th was significant. And it was significant, one, is it's 391 and a half years from 977 to 586 BC, the period for the kings of Judah in a divided empire. And we know that there's 120 years, and I'm not going to explain how I sorted all this out yet. I don't think I can do that, give it justice quite yet. Okay, I'll do it this way. Some people will understand and some people won't. Now, Daniel had counted from June 10th, counting ordinally, that is, he counted June 10th as one. I counted from June 9th, which was the close of Sabbath that happened on June 9th. At 9:11 p.m., Elder Jeff made a prayer, and 9/11 becomes an important symbol. 9:11 p.m., so it's on June 9th, but it's at 9:11 p.m. You probably won't be able to read that. But at 9:11 p.m., he does this prayer, and he had done a similar prayer earlier, and I'm not going to get into that study. But Daniel goes back to this history, and he counts 126 days. Now, July 27th, we're going to look at. But this is a period of 63 days, and this is going to be a period of 63 days. I'll get rid of October 3rd here. And the center of this is going to be August 11th. And this is what we're going to study next. This connected us to, this is about the prophecy of Josiah that predicts this. That's King Josiah. But we're going to see that there is a prophecy of Revelation 9 that is given by Josiah Litch in Millerite history. And that's what we're going to look at. So we have all these symbols. We're going to come back and we're going to draw this again in a bit different way. So hopefully everybody's following what I'm saying. I know some people have a bit more knowledge of this than others. Some people can follow it more easily than others. But Josiah Litch was an Adventist. And I'm only going to touch on this. I'm not going to go through and explain all the prophecy and how he came to it. But this is from Revelation 9. And in Revelation 9, there's two periods called woes. There's the first woe, and there's a thing called the second woe. And the first woe is connected to the fifth trumpet, which begins to sound way over here. And it's said that it's 5 months. And this is in Revelation 9, verse 5, and 9, verse 10, that it refers to this 5 months. The first period of 5 months is actually here, but we're just going to deal with this period of 5 months. This is what he is counting. And this is when, let's look at the passage here. Because I know there's going to be people who don't completely understand what I'm talking about. And so if you go to Revelation 9, and there's lots of people who do commentary on Revelation 9, old Protestant commentators who get some of it right and some of it wrong. But this is about the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given a key of the bottomless pit. So there's a bunch of symbolism here that I'm not going to go into in detail, but I can say that this is understood as referring to Muhammad. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So that's where we see in this next verse, and it was given, and to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. So we have here the symbol of locusts and scorpions, but we also have the symbol of 5 months. We know that 5 months is in a prophetic time, 30 days in a prophetic month. So 5 months is 150 days, and then we apply a day for a year. Now, so many people have recognized this, but Josiah Litch was the first one to realize the starting point for this prophecy. Now, it's more the second period of 5 months in verse 10, and they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and they had power, and their power was to hurt men 5 months, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Now this is a reference to Ottoman, or to Othman. It's the Ottoman Empire. And when it says that locusts have a king over them, we find in the Bible that locusts do not have a king. Let's see if I can find it here. That's Proverbs 30, verse 27. In Proverbs 30, verse 27, it says, the locusts have no king, yet they go forth, all of them in bands. But it's under Othman that they do have a king. And so this period, the beginning of the Ottoman Empire, is understood as being July 27th, 1299. And this is what Josiah Litch uses. He takes July 27th, 1299, and he counts 5 months. Now, when Josiah Litch does this in 1838, he's not thinking about which calendar is being used here. So this is a Julian calendar. So I'm going to take this date, and I'm going to write all the Julian dates underneath the line. And I'm just going to write the Gregorian date here as August 3rd. So he doesn't think about whether this is a Julian or Gregorian date. It is a Julian date. But if we put it on our calendar, it would be August 3rd. And then he just counts to July 27th. And then he's going to count from July 27th, the next line. So I'm just going to put July 27th up here. Because he's not being specific. He just knows that the 5 months ends on July 27th. Now, if he had put July 27th down here, the date I believe would have been August 5th. This would have been in 1449. So it would have been August 5th, not August 3rd. So if he had put July 27th as a Julian date, we would put August 5th up here. However, we're not going to do that. We're going to put July 27th as a Gregorian date. And we're going to put the Julian date of July 18th. And I'll show you in a minute why we're going to do that. Now he noticed the second woe, so that's the first woe talked about in Revelation 9. Now the second woe is talked about in Revelation 9:15. So you can always remember because it goes 5, 10, 15. And this is under the sixth trumpet in verse 14, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, a day, a month, and a year, for to slay the third part of men. So this is referring to the history. The third part refers to the Eastern Roman Empire. So this is going to be judgments upon Constantinople. And this is the second woe is going to last for a period of 391 years and 15 days, which we're going to deal with. And the way we know that, it says it's prepared for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year. So a year, 1 year equals 360 days in prophetic time. A month is 30 days. An hour, a day is 1 day. And an hour is a 24th part of a day. And the 24th part of a day, so 1 hour, would equal 15, that would be 1 hour. And if we're going to put it into days, it would be one part of a day, so that would be 1/24. But now what we're going to do is we're going to put this into years. So this would be 360 years in the day for a year. This would be 30 years. This would be 1 year. And the hour would end up being 15 days. So this is 391 years and 15 days. Now, of course, the way that we would look at this is we'd put the 15 days here. And if we were going to count 391 years, this is July 27th, 1840. 15 days later is August 11th, 1840. So the way that Josiah Litch did this is kind of odd, because he could have started, what he did is he actually added this 391 years and this 5 months together, which is 150 years. He had the 150, so he got 541 years, and he started from July 27th, Julian, and he went to July 27th, Gregorian. He didn't take into account that this is a Julian date and this is a Gregorian. If he was going to count from here, he would have had to count from August 3rd to August 3rd and then count 15 days. But he didn't do it that way. Or if he had just counted 391 from here, he could have moved from August 3rd here to August 3rd, but he could also use the Julian date. So there's 3 or 4 different ways that he could have calculated this, but he used the simplest. That is, he just used the date July 27th and the date July 27th and didn't take into account that there's 12 days difference between whether you're using a Julian or Gregorian in the 1800s. He didn't take that into account, even though he would have known about the change in the calendars. And this is a criticism that people have. But what I noticed is, now this date here, July 27th, would be July 15th, Julian, so I'm just going to write it in there. But what I noticed is that this date on the biblical calendar was this other symbol, the 26th day of the 4th month. And if I use the biblical calendar and I went to the 26th day of the 4th month, this was a Julian date of July 27th. This was a Gregorian date of July 27th. And this gave me the Gregorian date to count 391 years. So I'm counting from a Gregorian date to a Gregorian date for this period of time. I'm still using July 27th as the starting point, but I'm using the biblical calendar. So I'm connecting this Julian date and this Julian date by using the biblical date. But this is also the 26th day of the 4th month, of course. It's the same one. And this is the 26th day of the 4th month. Right? And so if he had used the biblical calendar, which he would have no knowledge of in the 1838 or in 1840, he wouldn't have known about the biblical calendar, how it worked. And he wouldn't have been able to figure this out here. He wouldn't have had the skills or the tools that we have now to do this quite easily on the internet. But if he had, he would have noticed that the 26th day of the fourth month was this continuous pattern, just as we saw the 10th day of the fifth month in Ezekiel. So he could have used the biblical calendar, but he didn't. But even though he didn't, he still got the right date, because in 1299, or in this one here this year, in 1449, the first day of the first month would be April 4th on the Gregorian calendar. Same thing here. If you have July 27th as the 26th day of the fourth month, that means the first day of the first month is April 4th. And April 4th was the first day of the first month in 1840. Now, he wouldn't have known that, and that maybe brings in a bit of a complexity, but the point is that the 26th day of the fourth month is an important biblical date in the prophecy of Josiah Litch, which comes from Revelation 9. So after we had this date over here, July 18th, 2020, which was July 31st, this was the 10th day of the fifth month from Ezekiel's prophecy. So we already have July 18th, but of course we didn't have a second witness. And we had based it loosely upon this idea of just, well, the 2020, and we're going to look at that a little bit more detail, some of the analysis of that. But we had this date in the future. But then we saw that in Ezekiel, there was the same patterning of the 26th day of the fourth month, just like there was the 10th day of the fifth month. And we know that Ezekiel was predicting not just the destruction of Jerusalem in 586, but he was also predicting the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And we said, well, those two destructions of Jerusalem are typical of the end of the world. So we could use this symbol of the destruction of Jerusalem as July 18th in the year 2020. But we need another witness. Now, we did have another witness from Samuel Snow's letters, which I'm not going to show yet. We'll see if we have time. And I'm not sure how long people want to go here. But let's see what time it is. Okay, so we've been going for a while. I don't think you want to go really long here. So we have this symbol of the 10th day of the fifth month, but we also have this. Now, this 15 days brings us to August 11th. August 11th, 1840 is this event, and I just want to lay this out here. First 1 year, I didn't do this when I presented it last time. But the way that you could look at it is this is 360 years. This is 30 years, 1 year. This is an hour, a day, a month, and a year. But these dates here, on the Julian calendar, July 27th is the 26th day of the fourth month. And this is in 1809. And this is 30 years later in 1839, July 27th is also the 26th day of the fourth month. And the 26th day of the fourth month here is July 27th on the Gregorian. There's a series of events that happened on July 27th, 1809, July 27th, 1839, and July 15th, 1840, that all connect to August 11th, 1844. It's the Treaty of Dardanelles that is signed regarding Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. There is in 1839 is the collective note that's also signed, and it's a secret note about what they want to do with Turkey. And then we also have July 15th, this date. So these happen on July 27th, and July 15th. These are Julian dates, but they're going to happen 12 days earlier on the Gregorian calendar. And this is going to be when the ultimatum at the Treaty of London is signed, and it's the ultimatum that's delivered to the Pasha in the Ottoman Empire. So I'm not going to go into this history so much, but this is what they predicted, is that the fall of the Ottoman Empire was going to happen, and that's because here Constantine XI, the last emperor of Rome, of Eastern Rome, he yields to the 4 Turkish sultans so that he can take his throne. course, that causes his demise. 4 years later, Constantinople is destroyed. But here at the end of the second woe, the Turkish Sultan submits to the 4 European powers. So the reverse of this history occurs here. That ends the second woe. And so this date here, August 11th, is the end. August 11th, obviously, 1840, demonstrated the year-day principle that it was correct, and it empowered the message, the first angel's message in Millerite history.
Theodore, could you repeat the reverse mirror there at the first woe and second woe? I want to get that straight. I keep getting that mixed up.
Okay, so if we go from August 11th and we go backwards 15 days.
Not really the dates, but the four that
So here the
Bow
four Turkish sultans. So in July 27th, it's not in July 27th it happens, but it happens in 1449. Constantine XI submits to the 4 Turkish sultans. He does this so that he can take the throne. And the date he does that is important too. It's just not July 27th, because this July 27th date comes from the start here. You just count 5 months. It brings you to the year 1449. And then you're going to count the 150 years and the 391 years to bring you here. So at the beginning of the second woe is the submission to the 4 Turkish sultans by Constantine XI. At the end of the second woe is the submission of the Turkish Sultan to the 4 European powers. So he's asking for their protection from Egypt. So this history here is mirroring this history here. It's a reverse of it. So that's how the second woe ends. Now, at that time, Josiah Litch, even though they recognized this fulfillment of prophecy, as time went on, they were surprised that Turkey continued. And Turkey continued till November 1st. And the date is, I should just have these things all memorized. But I know I get the year wrong sometimes. I know the year or the day. So yeah, it's November 1st, 1922. And that's when the Turkish Sultanate ends. There's no more Turkish sultans after November 1st, 1922. Now, the interesting thing about this date, on the biblical calendar, it's the 11th day of the 8th month. And you can see that August 11th is the 11th day of the 8th month on the Gregorian. But the date that the Turkish Sultanate actually completely ends is the 11th day of the 8th month on the biblical calendar. It happens to be November 1st, 1922, which isn't, as far as I know, as a symbol, doesn't have any significance. But this 11th day of the 8th month does. And so we can see that Josiah Litch was predicting this event, but he was also predicting this event, just didn't know it. But we also say that he was predicting another event. So what we did is we took this symbol of the 26th day of the 4th month, and we looked at what it would be in 2020, and we found that it would be July 18th, 2020. And that would be, it's going to be July 3rd, which doesn't really matter, so I'll just leave that out. But it's going to be the 26th day of the 4th month. So now we have a second witness to July 18th. There's 13 days between these two events. So it'd be July 5th. And, but these 26th day of the 4th month and the 10th day of the 5th month in the year 2020, and as they were in the 20th century and the 21st century, are 13 days apart. And so these two symbols now have significance together. Both of them are July 18th. One is Gregorian. The second one, the 10th day of the 5th month, is Julian. And it's a second witness to July 18th. So this idea, these two symbols are really what we're looking at to try to understand the 26th day of the 4th month as being July 18th, and the 10th day of the 5th month as being July 31st, which is also July 18th. And this
I've got a second witness for the year.
What's that?
I've got a second witness for the year.
What's
Page
that?
465 and 466, Great Controversy. Sister White, through a doubling in what she says, on 4/16/1901, if you'll take the 4/16 and add that up, that's 20, and the 1901, and you come up with another 20, and you come up with 2020.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of different witnesses we have for 2020. Now, one of the things now what I want to show you is how we came to 2020. So sure, I could look over here at 2020 and see that the 26th day of the fourth month is July 18th. But I need a span of time. I need structure. So we know that he has the 150 years, 391 years. But this 15 days, if we wanted to look at it, we'd look at it as 391 years and 0.5 months. That's one way we could look at this symbol, because 15 days is 0.5 of a month. But we could also just see this as a 0.5. Now, if we took it as a 0.5, and we're going to then take this 391 years, so we're going to make it into years, we're going to take this 0.5 of a year and make it symbolic or prophetic time. That is, we went from July 27th to July 18th, and we just took it as 6 months, which is 0.5 of a year. And we multiplied that, or, it's 6 months times 30 is 180. And so it's 180 days, which is 180 years. And so from 1840 to 2020 is 180 years. So that's really how that was our main argument initially, to connect July 18th to connect 1840 to 2020. But then when we saw the 26th day of the fourth month was July 18th, and we already have this as a symbol, then we saw that that was very significant. Now, I'm going to erase this top part, and I'm going to try to quickly go through what this all.
Sorry, I have a question here.
Okay.
Yeah, because we all know that Jehoiakim was captive in the year of 597.
Yeah.
And then after 5 years, Ezekiel got his first vision, right, in the year of 592. But in
Right.
Ezekiel,
So 597, 592. Yeah.
592, 5 years. But then in Ezekiel 24 verse 1 said that in the ninth year he got this vision, so that it should be in 588, in the year of 588, right? I don't understand.
Yes, because it's not the ninth year of, you're talking about the ninth year of Zedekiah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
So you're not doing it a clear enough math. So you're asking a question which I have an answer to, but it's not very simple. That is, there are two different counts in Ezekiel. Ezekiel is accounting the years of the captivity based on Jehoiachin's captivity. But when he counts the years of Zedekiah, those are different. Jehoiachin's captivity is fall to fall. So some people I may lose here dealing with, but there's two different calendars, two different counts. A king's reign can go spring to spring, so I'm going to do spring to spring, or it can go fall to fall. So they would be staggered like bricks. This is a fall to fall. Zedekiah's reign is spring to spring. Jehoiachin's is fall to fall. And I've worked this out in great detail, showing Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and how they all work together. There's only one way it works, and I have to look at every single possibility to figure out how we could take the chronology of Jeremiah and Ezekiel and make it fit. So when we say that the siege happened in the ninth year, it's actually happening right at the end of the ninth year in what we would call 587. So I'm not going to go into that in detail here. It's just too much, but I do have papers on it. So, and everything works out perfectly when you understand that there's two different calendars being used.
Yeah, because it's
Okay,
just
so
because
I know that doesn't really answer your question too much.
Yeah. Because okay,
But yeah,
just one
people,
more question, Elder. Just
yeah.
one more question.
Yeah.
Why do we have to extend the day until the 1st?
What do we what was your question?
Do
I can't hear the question. You kind of broke up a little bit. So state it again.
Just
You're cutting out for some reason. So we'll just keep your question and we'll ask it again. Just for some reason, your internet's not as stable as we'd like. So I couldn't hear what the question was.
Or type it.
Yep, Dana?
I was just going to say his internet isn't coming in good, so he could maybe type it and see if that would work.
Yeah, you can type it home if you want to. Just, yeah, that's fine. If you type the question, I can answer it. So now we have these dates, July 18th, Julian over here, the 10th day of the 5th month, July 18th, Gregorian on the 26th day of the 4th month. And we have made this prediction. So I'm going to draw this out here. Okay. So, and I'm just going to go here from, this is July 27th, 26th day of the 4th month in 1840. And we know we have this date all the way over here, July 18th, 2020. And it's also the 26th day of the 4th month. Now this date and its connection here, we just have this simple idea that it's 180 years. Now, when we had figured this out, there's things about July 18th that we have. We have these symbols, right? So we got another symbol. We have, remember, we have the symbols of midnight, which would be the 5th day of the 4th month. And we also have that symbol, which would also be the 21st day of the 7th month. And we call this midnight. So July 21st, 5th day of the 4th month. We also have the 15th day of the 8th month. That's the August 15th date. And this is the midnight cry. We have the 10th day of the 5th month. And this is for the destruction of the temple. And now we have this other symbol, the 26th day of the 4th month, that symbolizes Islam. And it's also connected to this other date, the 18th day of the 7th month. July 18th is the 18th day of the 7th month. And this symbol here, to understand what it is, it's actually a very broad symbol. When we looked at Millerite history, and we talked about this symbol midnight, the 5th day of the 4th month, and we had the 1st day of the 5th month, and we had the 10th day of the 7th month. These are waymarks in Millerite history. This is the first disappointment. This is the great disappointment. This is midnight. This is Boston. But we also have the 1st day of the 5th month. And the 1st day of the 5th month is Exeter. So this is midnight, and this is the midnight cry. And this history, in 2016, when I was studying Ezekiel, these were the waymarks we had on our line. And we could put these waymarks into our time. But this is Millerite history. We take Millerite history and we put it into our time. And we call this 9/11. This we had as 9/11. And then later on, we had this as a symbol called Raphia, which comes from Daniel 11. And this is Panium. And then this we had as a symbol of the Sunday Law. So this is our history from 9/11 to the Sunday Law we saw as part of Millerite history.
The interesting thing about this, I noticed a long time ago that from the first day of the first month, which is in this history is April 19th, this is July 21st, I'll put it up here, April 19th. This is July 21st. This is August 15th. And this is October 22. This was our waymarks, our lines, and we would line them up, Millerite history with our history. But I noticed from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the seventh month, at least by 2014, this was 187 days. I believe it was in 2014 that I first figured this out. Counting this as day 1 and this is day 187. And that is from sunset on April 18th to the completion of the 10th day of the seventh month is a complete period of 187 days. And we also found in Samuel Snow's letters, which I'm not going to do in detail here, but his last letter, which is 3 days before midnight, which is July 21st, when he presents at Boston, he had published a letter which was called Confirming the Covenant. And it's part of a structure which I'm not going to go into here this time because we're not going to have time now. But it is on July 18th that letter is published. So the 187 or July 18th becomes a symbol, and becomes a symbol in many different ways, but it's connected with this history. It's connected with this whole history is about 187. So when we have July 18th here as a symbol, this is a symbol dealing with this whole history of this movement, and that's why this is an important symbol. Now, we have marked it here as Islam and the destruction of Jerusalem in 2020. And we're predicting an event. But the event that we're predicting is, so I'm just going to erase this here now. The event that we're predicting is connected with Millerite history and its symbols, and also with Josiah Litch's prophecy. So this history is the history of the first atomic bomb. Now, when we first had this symbol here, July 18th, and of course we have the other July 18th, the 10th day of the fifth month, which is July 31st, July 18th, Julian. When we first had this history here, we didn't know, we just thought, at least I thought, this would be an attack on the United States by Islam. That's what made sense to me. Because we know on September 11th, (2001), we had the World Trade Center, and there's a connection between this chronologically, which I'm not going to go into, but this is what I would call the start of the third woe, and this would be the part of the end of the third woe. There's more to this history than that, but this is a period of the time of the third woe. So the first woe is Islam, the second woe is Islam, the third woe is Islam. So I knew that this must symbolize Islam, since it symbolizes Islam over here. But the question is, what kind of an attack? And I started thinking, well, what if it's a nuclear attack? And so I asked the question, when was the first nuclear attack in history? And of course we know that was Hiroshima. So Hiroshima was on August 6th, 1945. Now, August 6th itself isn't really significant, but what we did notice, or I did, is when I looked at the biblical calendar, this was this date, the 26th day of the fourth month. So this symbol that we had from Josiah Litch's prophecy all through in 1299, 1449, 1809, 1839, and 1840, the symbol of the 26th day of the fourth month, was the first atomic attack. But then we noticed that the second atomic attack was August 9th. And August 9th is interesting because this is July 27th on the Julian calendar. That is, this date here connects all the way back to July 27th, 1299, with the rise of the Ottoman Empire. So July 27th, Julian, lines up with Nagasaki.
Now, we also noticed that the first attack, the Nagasaki was not meant to be the target. They had planned originally Hiroshima and Kokura. And you can find this by Kokura, but just looking in Hiroshima, the nuclear attacks here, Japan, in Wikipedia. This was supposed to be on August 11th. Well, there we have another symbol from Josiah Litch's prophecy. Actually, all the three main dates, the 26th day of the fourth month, July 27th, and August 11th. But it doesn't end there. We also looked at the fact that when Japan rejected this message that came to them, the call to surrender, or you're going to see what's going to happen. This was on July 27th, Gregorian, that Japan, they rejected what's called the Potsdam Declaration. So they rejected that on July 27th. It was actually made on July 26th. Japan, of course, is a lot earlier. Their time zone's different. And they received that at midnight, around midnight on July 27th. And then they ended up ignoring it, which led to this attack on Hiroshima on the 26th day of the fourth month. So we have the July 27th date, both Gregorian and Julian represented, and the 26th day of the fourth month, and August 11th. So all four of those dates that we have in Josiah Litch's prophecy are represented here in 1945 with this first nuclear attack. But we also noticed that the first nuclear bomb was dropped on July, or not dropped, but tested. So the first test, which is at Alamogordo, on July 16th, so this is 11 days before the Potsdam Declaration, they tested the atomic bomb. That's why they could make this declaration, because they knew they had this weapon that they could use against Japan. Now this is July 16th, but this is on the biblical calendar, the 5th day of the fourth month. You can see it's actually 21 days between July 16th and August 6th. So the 26th day of the fourth month and the 5th day of the fourth month. So this is the symbol from Millerite history and from Ezekiel. This is Samuel Snow, halfway between the first day of the first month and the 10th day of the seventh month, which is a period of 187 days, at midnight. I watched a video on this test, and it's interesting that when they get to July 16th, they show on the screen midnight, July 16th, when it started. But that's the 5th day of the fourth month. And now this, of course, is midnight, right? So we're going to just call this midnight. But Japan surrenders on August 15th. Remember, August 15th is a symbol of the midnight cry. So just this history itself connects us with Japan. Now, Japan and Islam are symbols. They have similar symbols. They both have suicide bombers, the kamikaze, and of course the suicide bombers of Islam, radical Islam. They also both come from the East. Japan's symbol is the rising sun. Islam's symbol is the moon. But they're both Eastern powers. East is a symbol of them. But they're connected by these symbols here that come from Josiah Litch's prophecy and Millerite history, which is what this is all about. And there's a number of other things. If I go back to the beginning, July 27th, 1299, and I use the Islamic calendar. So the Islamic calendar has a year that's 354.37 days long. But if I count from July 27th, 1299 to, which is the 26th day of the fourth month, right, to August 6th, which is the 26th day of the fourth month in 1945, it's 646 of our years, but on the Islamic calendar, it's 666 years. It's also exactly 38 Metonic cycles, which doesn't mean much to most people, but these are periods of the lunar calendar, of the solar lunar calendar of the Jerusalem calendar, or the Jewish calendar. That's 19 years is a period of 235 months, and that would be 38 times 235 months to go from here to here. So, so there's lots of connections between here and here. But if we go from Hiroshima to July 18th, one of the symbols we had from Islam and we had from Josiah Litch was this symbol, 391.5. The number of weeks from here to here is 3,910 weeks and 5 days. As a symbol, this is 391.5 as a symbol. Obviously, we can drop the 0 because it's just a placeholder. So we have the symbol of 391.5 in the number of days from Hiroshima to July 18th, 2020. Now, we have many more things that we could do. Now, I did show on Sabbath, I did a presentation on this, and I showed also that there's more to this. And I'm probably going to do that next Friday. I'm going to break this up a little bit. I'm going to review this in a simply as well. And next Friday, I'm going to explain more about this July 18th prediction. And I think this was a good idea. I think we need to focus on July 18th. I presented this in other ways, in other places. But I want to look at this and try to break this down a bit more simply than I even presented it here. Now I say this is simply, this is not obviously very simple in a lot of ways. It's simple in some ways, but it also has a lot of information and some complexities. So I just want to point out the main thing. I'm just going to review and then we're going to close and maybe take some questions. But the idea is that Ezekiel could predict an event in the future and inadvertently predict another event that he had no idea about. And it was based upon a symbol of the 10th day of the 5th month. And we see that Josiah Litch could predict an event in the future, but he could also predict another event that he had no idea of. And that same symbol was attached to that event, the end of the Turkish Sultanate. But we could also see that both of them could be predicting events in our history. And this is really, really interesting when we start to bring the Mayan calendar into this, which we're going to do next time. But this history is testified to in a number of different ways. And I want to look at that in some more detail. And I know I've done it before in various studies, even on some Friday night studies. But I think it's something that we really need to grasp. As we're approaching July 18th, 2020, many of us have a partial understanding of this prediction. We know we've seen all the analysis, the numerical analysis, the unlikeliness that these things are connected. Just like I could look at this analysis here with 1945 and the atomic bomb. But the thing is, we didn't arrive at July 18th using that method. We arrived at July 18th using prophecy. We didn't use numbers to predict. We didn't just do some math. We actually looked at the structure of prophetic chronology. And this structure exists in all of the prophecies of Scripture. There are things like chiasms, which Christ has in his 70th week, this chiasm of 3.5 years and 3.5 years. And that's the primary chiasm that unlocks all prophecy. But this existed long before in the story of Joseph, in the story of the Israelites from the time that they sojourned, their sojourning period. It exists all through Scripture. It exists in the story of Ezra leaving Babylon and arriving at Jerusalem. There's these chiasms. There's chiasms in Millerite history. These structures all connect together like wheels within wheels. And we know that Ezekiel sees in vision these wheels within wheels. And that's what we're seeing right now, is we're seeing what Ezekiel saw. They appear to be in confusion, but they have perfect order. And that we're at this time in Earth's history where we can see these things, to me, is absolutely amazing. And this means that we're seeing what Ezekiel saw. Now, we're not, of course, in vision. We're seeing it through God's word as we study it, because this is the way that God wants us to understand truth in these times, that we can prophesy not based upon seeing a vision, but based upon studying God's word. And in a sense, we are seeing something new. In a sense, we are seeing a vision. We're seeing something that Ezekiel saw that he couldn't describe, but we're seeing it in God's word. And so I think it's really important that we take time to study this. So that's basically my presentation. Are there any questions that people would have? I know I need to look at
There's
some of the
questions
written
in the chat.
questions. So there was a question, please correct 521 to 591, which I corrected. I thought it should be 592 BC. So I'm not sure what should have been not 592 because I erased it. So 592 is when Ezekiel has his first prophecy, and then the 10th day of the 5th month, in 390 days later, is 591 BC. And so I think that's what Hung is referring to. So just to go back to Ezekiel, remember he's going to start on the 5th day of the 4th month, and you probably can't see this. So he's going to start on the 5th day of the 4th month, and for 390 days he lies on his left side. And this is obviously a year later, since this is 592. He's the last day he lies on his left side is in 591, and it's the 10th day of the 5th month. Right, so that's the 591, which I've written, I think, is 521. So that's why. Now you could look at it another simpler way. If you go from July 21st to August 15th, which is where he's doing this, it's actually 25 days from here to here. And if you add 360 plus 25, pardon me, 365, because we have 365 days a year, plus 25, it equals 390. So that's how you can know that 390 days goes from July 21st to August 15th. Now, of course, that's the next day. He's going to start lying on August 15th. He's going to start lying on his right side. This would be counted as 390, counting this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 0, to get to the 10th day of the 5th month. So it's the last day that he lies on his left side is the 10th day of the 5th month, and the first day he lies on his right side is August 15th. And you can confirm this in Parker and Duberstein's chronology, that the 10th day of the 5th month is July 21st, 592, and that, or the 5th day of the 4th month, pardon me, is 592, and the 10th day of the 5th month is August 14th, right? So it'd be August 14th, 591. So I hope that helps with that question.
I've got a statement and a question.
What's that?
I've got a statement and a question.
Okay.
I see both fire from heaven and Islam in this picture. If I go to Ezekiel 21:13, 21 being midnight, 13 being confusion, and I look for two words in that text, the rod and the fire. There are 3 verses in the Bible where God uses the rod and the fire at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I've said publicly that there's fire from heaven in this picture, and there is a missile from Islam.
Yes, and we know that, arrows represent Islam. Ellen White saw arrows in the vision of the destruction of Nashville, which, we probably can actually, at some point, I think I want to do a detailed study relating to Nashville and the target, because right now you're sort of relating to some of those ideas regarding Nashville and Islam, which I'm not getting into here. So we could probably use that question later on when we look at some of this in more detail. Now the question.
Okay, I've also got a coordinate.
Okay.
I'm an old driver.
I know you.
Always
saying that we need to do that when we do the other study, because right now it's out of context, right?
I'll steal my
we're throwing stuff into this. We will do it. We'll deal with that when we deal with Nashville and the coordinates, because right now, we're just dealing with the idea that it's a nuclear attack. We're saying it's Nashville, but we're not showing the evidences right now for Nashville. We will at another study. So Hung had
There's a
another
4041
question.
coordinate as well, other than the 390, whatever. There's
Yeah.
a 4041 in there also.
I know, and I understand that, but we can't. That's just going to confuse everybody at this point. So we need to look at the evidences for why we chose Nashville. That's a whole other study. Now the question was, why do we have to extend July 18th to July 31st? I'm not sure what you mean by extend it. We first picked July 31st because we picked July 18th because we picked the 10th day of the 5th month in 2020. So the first date that we had was this date, July 18th, the 10th day of the 5th month, which happens to be July 31st. And the question, I think, is why are we extending it to 2020? Why do we put it there?
Okay, I personally don't extend it because of the fact that in 2021, God uses a word I can't pronounce, COMM something. And if you go to the Ellen G. White's illustrated with her writings Bible that I've got, that word means mocking. Elijah mocked the priest of Baal.
Yeah.
And here God says, Islam is mocking me.
Yeah.
So this
Okay.
is
But that's
an
still,
event that are two events that happen near the same time.
yeah. Well, Chuck, that's still kind of an aside. So we're going to deal with those things later on. We're going to deal with that part of it. The question he's asking is, why did we go to July 31st? And the question is, the first symbol we had was the 10th day of the 5th month. But then we got, for Islam, we had the symbol of July 18th. So the relationship between these is what we don't fully understand yet. We know that both of them symbolize July 18th, or July 18th becomes a symbol for both of them, but they're tied together by the 10th day of the 5th month and the 26th day of the 4th month. And so what that means, I don't particularly know. I can't answer that completely at this time, but I think we're going to understand it as we approach it, especially as we start to look at Nashville. And I think we can start to get some clearer pictures. But we know that both of these contain a symbol. One contains a symbol of Islam. The other contains a symbol of the destruction of Jerusalem, or the temple specifically. And so we would believe that this relates to an attack on the United States by Islam, and this relates to the fall of the church, or maybe the United States itself. So Hung asked, do you think that this is the tearing time? And he's asking everyone. Well, that's a good question. Obviously, we would have to be in the tearing time in the context of, if we're looking at the line of the Levites. So we have other lines in which we look at it, and we would say that we're looking at midnight and the midnight cry, and that would be a tearing time. So there's different ways that we can look at it. On Sunday, I address those. I'm going to address those in much more detail, because we're not studying here right now Millerite history. We've referred to it because we need the symbols of it, midnight and the midnight cry, and we need to study further these symbols in understanding our line. So that's another question that really we can't answer completely here. I mean, I can say I believe we are, but to try to explain it it's too much for this study. So the focus of this study is just basically upon how we arrived at July 18th. And we did so by using Ezekiel, which he uses the prophecy of Josiah, which I haven't really gone into in detail, which is in 1 Kings 13, verse 1 to 5, and it's fulfilled in 2 Kings 23, 18 to 21. So you can look at those verses. But that starts a period of 390 years and a period of 40 years that both end together.
an event that he's looking for in the future, and he's using a day for a year to do that. But we know that Ezekiel is also predicting the destruction of Jerusalem, not just the siege of Jerusalem, specifically the destruction of the temple on the 10th day of the 5th month. And then we could also see that Josiah Litch, who has a period, and they both have similar periods. One's 391 and a half, if you add the year and a half to the 390. And then the other one's 391 and a half months. So one's 391 and a half years, one 391 and a half month. They both have the name Josiah attached to them. Ezekiel has the message of the midnight and the midnight cry attached to him. We can also attach this to Samuel Snow then, because of those symbols of midnight and the midnight cry. And so we can just continue to add these layers to this message regarding July 18th. So hopefully those things make sense to people. I know we're going to have to do this again next Friday, the Lord willing. And any other questions before I end the recording, and before I end with prayer and then end the recording?
I have a question.
Emmanuel.
I thoroughly kind of enjoyed the information that was presented today, by the way. Just trying to get, wrap my mind around all of the different wheels that are taking place that kind of lead to the same place sometimes is amazing, because when you think you have a kind of a knowledge of something, there's so much more that ties into it that solidifies everything again. So my question was, how many parts to a July 18th presentation do you think you would specifically need to kind of break down the elements of maybe all the questions that even just came up, in connection with, let's say, Nashville, or, the time, or the 31st versus the 18th versus the Gregorian and Julian, what does that look like? Because the date's coming, and these presentations, I really enjoyed this presentation, but to look forward to next Friday might be a little bit much for me, instead of kind of tackling some of it sooner, because it seems like there's a lot of information that a lot of us are kind of wanting.
Well, I do have all the videos on my YouTube page, and I do go through these things in the YouTube page in different ways. So the different studies that I've been doing since March, obviously those are going to give you a lot of information. But if I was going to present everything I know about July 18th, I could present for 15 hours a day for 6 months, and I would not cover all of it.
Really?
That's part of the problem, is I'm giving you these little pieces of information, but the amount of information that we have, it would take up volumes of books, because we're talking about basically years and years of study, of 40, 50 hours a week of detailed study. Now, some of that information I forget. I have it written, I have all these charts and diagrams, but there's so much that I'm not even showing anybody, because nobody can really appreciate it. It's too much. Some of it I can't write down. I can't write down everything that's in my head. I'm a very slow writer. So wow. I sort of give these outlines, and they still look very complicated. They still look like there's so much information, but I'm leaving out so much. And somebody says July 18 news is still an empty box. I'm not sure when they're going to get the July 18 website up. It was supposed to be up already. Nobody's ever informed me about it, so I'm not sure when. But yeah, it's a lot of information. Now, the thing is, we don't need all that information. So I've studied for years. I have lots of information that I've never shared. Every once in a while, some of these little pieces of information become pertinent.
Just going to jump in there for a sec, Theodore, on the website, on WhatsApp, whatchamacallit, Clayton said he received the last article and it should be ready this week. He said the first second it goes up, he's going to announce it on WhatsApp. Should be ready by the end of this week.
Okay, great. Great news there, Kelly. So we'll have July 18th up. Be interesting to see how it looks and how readable it is. And I mean, I wrote a number of the articles there
I don't know how readable they are. Hopefully people can understand them. Just an interesting aside, I have academia.edu, my concordia.ab.ca, Theodore Turner. So I'm connected through when I taught at Concordia University, I'm connected to this academia site, which academics publish papers. And I've been publishing my papers on there for years. And I've been getting an average of about 30 or 40 people reading my papers every day. So 30 or 40 papers are read every day. About 4 or 5 days ago, that number started to climb. It climbed to 115 one day. The next day was 180. The next day was 286 or something, or 294. The next day was 438 or something. It's just been growing. And here, I'll just show you this, what I mean.
And those are unique readers, or is that right?
Well, it shows
Like first time, or
how many papers are read. So sometimes one person can read more than one paper. It'll show me how many unique readers there are as well. So I'll just show you my academia site here. So here's what it looks like. I have all my papers on there. So it's academia.edu. The readers is what's listed there. I'm just going to look at my analytics. So my analytics is kind of the interesting part here. And I'm going to blow this up so it's a little bit bigger. So this is my traffic that's increased. So yesterday was 435. The day before was 294. The day before that was 267. Then 180, 115, 82. But you can see it's like 33, 30, 51. And that's how it's been going for months. So all of a sudden this jump in my papers is, and you'll see 398 document views, 332 unique visitors today. That's how many people had read my papers today and how many papers were read. And the biggest paper that's being read right now is the Mayan calendar in July 18, 2020. So that's the one that everybody seems to be reading. So I think it's just really interesting that as we approach July 18th, there's an interest, and I have no idea why this interest has jumped. There are people all over the world, names I don't recognize. They're not people I'm friends with on Facebook. So I have no idea. I know a lot of them search on Google and some on Facebook, so maybe other people are sharing these papers. I have no idea, but I've never seen an explosion like this in the years that I've had my site. Even when I get a new paper, the most I've ever gotten in one day is about 250, and that was when my July 18, 2020 paper came out. But then it dropped right away after that. I've never had something build like this. So it's pretty interesting what's happening. And I believe, obviously, once the July 18th website goes on, that we'll probably see even my site gets a lot more views as well, because it should be referenced on there and people will find my papers through that as well. So, we're living in a time that's a pretty special time to live. And so we're gonna close with prayer, and then we can talk a little bit afterwards. So let's kneel. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for all the things you teach us and for this light that is so abundant that's shining upon our path. Help us to appreciate it, and for each of us individually to not be overwhelmed by the amount of light, but to just walk in the light that you give us. Help us to be faithful. We know, Lord, that this is more light than one person could understand. It's definitely more light than could ever be shared to another person. But we know, Lord, that you work in each of our lives, and you give us the light that's sufficient for each step of the path. Please be with our message, with this church, and with those that are searching for truth. Thank you for the Sabbath hours. And we just ask that you can be with us and guide us and keep us and bring us together again to study your word. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Man.
Okay. So I'm just going to turn off the recording here. So,
Yeah, Theodore.
yep, just hang on.